Hi, by the way, Tribe Athletes. Today we have 3 different training splits that are very common amongst calisthenics athletes and for good reasons. And we will navigate through them to understand which one suits you the most right now and why is it so. So before I get going, for one-on-one online coaching, check the link in the section below. And we have also affordable calisthenics programs, content, exercise tutorial, nutrition recipes in the Bodyweight Tribe, link as well as in the description. Thank you. So let's start with the first training split. The straight arm bent arm is a very common training split, and for a good reason. It's a hell of a split, and it is usually performed by like intermediate type of athletes that can really fulfill a straight arm workout. At the beginning, most athletes intuitively sense that they don't really need to do straight arm work. Like if you don't have dips and push-ups and pull-ups and rows, you will simply not hold even a tuck planche to a significant degree or tuck front lever. So it is often not trained by novices. The straight arm bent arm usually is performed straight arm bent arm rest twice a week. So you have 4 training sessions a week. And something that would be general to all training splits, I did not incorporate lower body training, leg training, as it is not specific for calisthenics performance, but you can insert one leg day instead of one of the rest days in each of the splits, and you can make it work. It does not really compete for the same muscle groups recoverability. Straight arm bent arm rest twice per week. Some people, as they are still young in their training development, would perform that thrice a week, so 1 rest day. I even did that, but that is sustainable somewhat for a beginner, especially if he is a light athlete, relatively light or short, because he can recover much quicker and train the next day for multiple days on end. As well as calisthenics is not as fatiguing on the central nervous system, so you can sustain 6 days of relatively heavy training to those movements in a row. The straight arm bent arm, you can perform the same workouts twice a week, or you will have some sort of a heavy and the volume. One you go closer to failure, one you will perform for higher reps or isometric duration holds. And intensity and light, so one closer to failure, maybe low reps, and one would simply be far from failure, could be low reps or high reps as well. But that type of split, straight arm, bent arm twice per week, leads us to twice a week per movement frequency. But even more so than that, you have per muscle group 4 times the training frequency. The lats will be trained 4 times a week. The delts will be trained 4 times a week. The chest will be trained 4 times a week to a certain extent. Hence, I wrote 3 because it's a half a frequency, not a full frequency, or not repeating the same movements necessarily. But when you perform 1 arm chin up on your bent arm day and front lever on your straight arm day, as both pulling exercises, the lats are incorporated and the upper back is incorporated, so it gets stressed in both of those events, although those are different movements. So per muscle group, the frequency is very high. That means that if you're carrying an injury, let's say in the elbow, and you train the elbow to a certain extent, either through straight arm with planche or bent arm with 1 arm chin up, which is very aggravating on the medial epicondyle, that golfer's elbow that tends to occur with high frequencies of specifically vertical pulling. It gets trained, it gets very hard to manage the load, manage the fatigue, and potentially reduce that injury as we go through training slightly. Hopefully, eventually it decreases altogether. But you cannot pinpoint which session aggravated more so than the other, because all of the sessions overlap in recovery and adaptation processes. You train the planche and then the handstand push-up. So if your shoulder is fatigued, you're not sure which one should I lower the volume of. I'm not sure if the maybe planche responds different than the handstand push-up. That can also, when you get, so that's injury, if you have a nagging injury, that's not the split to run. You will be much safer lowering the frequency, and even if you did high intensity and volume workout, then you bashed the muscle, you still have a lot of days ahead of you to get full rest, regardless of the amount of stress that you induced in that single effort. That split works best for beginners and intermediates because, again, the frequency is very high. You have to recover. If your shoulder is fatigued from the straight arm, you will not perform optimally on bent arm. Beginners and intermediates, light, so short wingspan, short height, below 70 kilogram. Even that training split for a very beginner but a heavy 90 kilogram athlete or extremely tall, 190 centimeters athlete, that will be a lot on the joints to sustain. So even for a beginner, I will not recommend that necessarily. It's best for technique. You have a lot of touches, twice per movement each week, to train each movement. And per muscle group, you have even more so than that, 3 to 4 times, like we said, per week. So whenever we talk high frequency of training, it's best for promoting technical adaptation. So if you're trying to improve fast in a short period of time, that's your best route to success. Because the best improvements, the fastest improvements, not the best, would be the technical one. You can let's say, put more torque in the planche, rotate the elbow, the next set can be better. And where we're talking about muscle mass increases or the potential, so that we're talking weeks and months on end. So best for technique. This training splits leads us to the next one, which is also performed amongst a lot of different calisthenics athletes, and for good reasons. It's the push-pull, often the push-pull leg type of split. Push-pull, we will disregard legs for now. Rest twice a week. Similar to the straight arm and bent arm, you can run heavy and light, or heavy or high intensity and volume. The difference between the straight arm and the bent arm, you notice that there's some overlap in them. The main difference is we're still training each muscle or each movement pattern twice a week, but we are now forcing all muscle groups into one day. So the muscle group has more time to recover towards the next session. It has 3 to 4 days. That's the 1.5 to 2 times frequency. It's 2 times frequency per movement and per muscle group running this type of splits. It makes it safer if you have any training injury that you want a nagging injury, which not completely disallows you to train altogether, but hopefully if you're managing recovery enough and maybe dropping a certain exercise that promotes or aggravates the injury, over time it will dissipate. Running 2 times per muscle group split allows you, still have to be very diligent about stress and recovery, allow you enough time for that muscle group or that area that is involved in many movements and exercises, more recovery time. It's slightly safer, it's easy to track and make changes. If you had a pulling workout, the next day you can feel how many DOMs you have. You don't have to perform a straight arm pulling workout the next day. So if your back is fatigued, you can still train to somewhat maximum potential the pushing movements, the plunge, the handstand push-up, the dips, the push-ups, and so forth. So it makes it easier to recover, spreads the SRA curve, better for intermediate athletes for that reason. It better suits the average build athlete, so 70 kilogram, 75 kilogram athletes. It has a good ratio of technique and fatigue. You still touch each movement twice a week, but per muscle group, it's still twice a week per movement. You're not sacrificing maybe recovery, if it's the chest, from handstand push-ups and plunge and dips and multiple overlapping movements one day after the other. So if you are that average build, intermediate, those workouts try to work, they tend to work great. Twice a week frequency is something that I often recommend for a lot of athletes. For intermediates, it works best. It's not too much, so you risk injury or overtraining. And it's not too little that you risk not really practicing the movements as frequent as maybe they should, because calisthenics skills are high technical demand movements. We go to the next one. It's the one lift a day or one skill a day for calisthenics. Handstand push-up, front lever, we'll use the same examples. Handstand push-up, front lever, rest, planche, one arm chin-up, rest, rest. So that's usually how it is laid out. We would spread between the pushing and the pushing, and the pulling and the pulling, so they will not be back to back. They will be spread 3 to 4 days apart, and you will insert rest days in between. You can run this program. You basically perform one movement a day. So one movement a day, one day the handstand push-up and all its relevant exercises, one day the front lever and all these relevant exercises. So front lever, you maybe perform holds, move on to a secondary movement, maybe front lever pulls, move on to accessory movements, maybe like rows, so another horizontal pulling, but bent arm to more support muscular growth. That's how a day would usually seem. So you have one session per movement a week, but week to week you'll probably run some sort of a linear periodization. So a week of 10 repetitions, 8, 6, 4, doubles, singles. Or wave, you can run it, 1 week high rep, 1 week low rep, 1 week high rep, medium rep, 1 week even lower repetitions in a wave fashion. It's an all-out session. Each day you are entering that skill with in mind the idea of I'm distracting that movement and all the relevant muscle groups. Why? Because it's the lowest frequency amongst the 3 training splits, 1 per movement, 1.5 per muscle group. Remember, you still have the plunge, but per movement it's only 1, so it's safe, and you have enough recovery time towards that overlapping muscle groups in that secondary pushing workout throughout the week. So you can really enter the session with an all-out mindset. The shoulders are worked in both of them, or the lats in the pulling session are working both of them, but you will be fine, you'll probably recover, you can smash this workout. This is the American type of attitude towards training, very similar to, in the bodybuilding realms, the bro split, where you enter and you have one muscle group or a big muscle group per day, but that's the only attention that muscle group will get throughout the week. So it's one leg day, it's one arm day, it's one chest day, it's one back day, it's one shoulder day, and you rest. So you can really smash it. And once you smash that muscle group or movement in our case, because we're more strength and skill oriented, you can really start noticing a pattern recovery-wise throughout the week. How are my DOMs dissipating? Let's say you had the handstand push-up and your arms are very fatigued the next day. So you can really get a good grasp about, I did that much volume, that led to that much delayed onset muscle soreness, fatigue, a lack of range of motion from soreness and so on, all that lack of decrease in performance for that short term. You can really start seeing a direct relation between those two, and that's something that you'll have to know about yourself as you go, regardless of the training program. Because each training program can work. You can make that program work for advanced, you can make that program work for a beginner, although there are some general guidelines and I will do recommend following them. But you can make it work as long as you figure out 2 things that are the most important when you're structuring a training program. The one being the stress recovery ratio. So am I sufficiently stressing the muscle group today and allow it enough recovery time towards the next one. And the second, provided I perform the first ingredient, what is the progression rate? How much do I add in reps or sets or weight or variation, duration hold towards the next session or the next week? Okay, you recovered. How much do you change or progress? Do you move in repetitions? So once you have those two, the stress recovery and progression rate, progression method, you have basically the training program figured out. You can change exercises. You have many exercises that can complement one goal. It's not just one structure that can allow it. That program works best for advanced because each exercise is very taxing. Each exercise when you're advanced, it's not handstand push-up and front lever and planche necessarily. Maybe at this stage it's Maltese and iron cross for the pulling, or it might be Victorian or one arm chin-up. Every exercise is very, very fatiguing. The handstand push-up might be with 20 kilograms. So you have to allow more recovery time. More stress must be accompanied with more rest days. In some fashion, those might not be fully rest days, but they must be recovery days. We prioritize fatigue over technique. So we go into the session with the idea of we really express a lot of force, a lot of strength, a lot of fatigue accumulated throughout that session, but we only have once a week to touch each movement. Maybe for a slow learner, which usually are also slow gainers, those are people that tend to gain strength and muscle mass much lower, or at least it seems so, compared to other athletes. That's not maybe the best training split decision for them. They have to practice each movement more frequently because usually those type of athletes, those type of trainees, I really compliment them by saying athletes, they're the least athletes among the few, but they have to practice a lot of ring muscle up transitions, otherwise they will not have ring muscle ups, regardless of the strength in the chin up and in the dip. And for some people, they just see another athlete perform that and they can really understand, they can understand the gap that is between the chin-up and the dip, and their mind, motor unit-wise, motor learning, they can really fill that gap. So for a fast gainer, someone who also knows how to exert a lot of force in a singular effort, creating more fatigue, usually one lift a day, one skill a day is a better choice. It makes injuries much easier to track, to progress, to manage. So you can enter, let's say you know that the one-arm chin-ups gives you the most potential for injury, and you might have a nagging injury in your elbow. Maybe it's a golfer elbow, and it's usually one-arm chin-up or chin-up related. You only have one session. So after that session, you can really check the amount of stress, the amount of, you wake up the next day, you feel when it is often cold, it's the best time to really understand how does it move, what really hurts, in what motion, and to what extent. You can really try to understand how much damage you did, and that shall not surpass the ability for you to recover and gradually overload that muscle. If you have another one-arm chin-up or front leg, or rowing or something bent that is pulling the next day, you might not recover. Here at least you have 7 days to recover, even if the fatigue accumulated was very high. This split works best for heavy, long athletes in height, in wingspan, 80, 85 kilogram athletes, 90 kilogram athletes, for the same reason that advanced skills demand more recovery time because they have more stress built in them. When you're 85 kilogram, every set is heavier than someone who weighs 60 kilogram. A chin-up is heavier, it creates more stress. So better for heavy and long athletes. All those splits can work, but you have to over time understand what type of athlete are you. That type of program, the 1 skill a day, a lot of people that go balls to the wall enjoy this type of training because they don't have to be over complex about fatigue management, how many reps from failure I need to be in each set, or depending on the exercise, if it's accessory I can go heavier. No, they have one mindset. They have go heavy or go broke. So they train the movement, they either via high reps or high intensity, they only know max effort, they only know close to failure or to failure or surpassing failure. So if I put an athlete who is high intensity guy, who enjoys competing, who enjoys the thrill under a highly demanding fatigue management, RPE, repetitions from failure type of program, I do not put him in the best scenario to really flourish and thrive and succeed. Regardless of whether he could have performed it better, this one will create the scenario that he is motivated to train, therefore works harder, it suits him, and by working harder, depending on the amount of recovery that you allow, in this case a lot, you will grow and you will see better results. So if you know that you're that type of athlete, you can gravitate towards that 1 and 1.5 times frequency per week. If you're a slow gainer, maybe a skinny build, relatively a beginner or a lighter athlete, you can work your way through just chipping away every workout. Nothing thrilling, nothing high intensity, but you're putting the frequency and the consistency. You're doing the same pattern 3 times a week. You're doing chin-ups 3 times a week. No, doesn't really matter, how hard you hit today. It's the fact that over the course of a week, you perform 3 training sessions with the same movement, a lot of technical development, but also the accumulated volume was high, maybe higher than the one that did more volume, but only in a singular session. So you're chipping away your days towards being more advanced or stronger or bigger. So know the frequency. This one is harder to manage. It's more for the safer type of athletes, the risk management type of athletes, those who like control, being control and controlling all aspects of life. They usually prefer routines. They have routines for everything, and if you change something, it creates stress. Those type of frequencies work best. You can do a straight arm, bent arm, even 3 times a week, having only 1 rest day. Those type of athletes usually do not overexert themselves or even know neurologically how to exert a lot of force in one single lung effort, something that you can check also with vertical jump, since it's highly genetic and really not really related to amount of practice using the jumping motion. It's highly genetic, something that will be relatively low in performance when they perform. Those risk management control routine type of athletes, higher frequencies, high intensity guys, balls to the walls, that type of low frequency, 1 skill a day. And that's the video for today. 3 great training splits that can work and will work, provided you understand those 2 key areas that I discussed. The recovery and stress ratio to you, and progression rate provided. And we have a lot of videos about progression rates and progression models and how to add and how to run through different training mesocycles and microcycles, and you can check that. That's not the idea of this video. So again, if you want one-on-one online coaching, you can check the link in the description below, or we have much affordable calisthenics programs and tips and nutrition and recipes and exercise tutorial. That's on the Bodyweight Tribe. You can check that too. Everything will be great regardless. So see you next time.